Today, we have Stephanie Miller. She's going to talk to us about her new book, Zero Waste Living, the 80-20 Way. So, Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lucia. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure. So, how did you get involved in sustainability and zero waste?
Well, I have always been attracted to the concept of conservation. I consider myself a conservationist from a young age, but I've always been a really busy person. And for as long as I remember, I wanted to do the right thing on the environment, recycling better, getting products that were better for the environment, reducing my waste. But I never felt I had time because I was so busy. And in fact, I felt that way while I was leading climate change at the private sector part of the World Bank Group, where it was my job to help governments and private sector get on a more sustainable path. But then I'd come home and in my own life, I just wasn't feeling like I was doing enough. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to take a gap year, as I call it. And I wanted to spend more time with my son, who was about to go off to college. So I left that organization that I'd been in for 25 years, and I suddenly had time on my hands. And so I decided I would try to see what I could do to reduce my own personal waste and carbon footprint. And the very first thing I did, may sound a little strange, but something I'd been wanting to do for a really long time, I went into my dry cleaners, which I'd been going to once or twice a week when I was working, and I asked them if they could put our dry cleaning into a reusable garment bag that I had at home. And to my surprise, this was really not a big deal. We ended up, I helped them adopt a reusable bag program. And then within a very short period of time, a few months later, their customers were asking for this. And today they have more than a third of their customers that use these reusable bags. So it was very inspiring and energizing. And that's really what, it was about that time that I learned about the concept of zero waste living, and I decided I wanted to embark on it as well. So that's how it all began.
What a bless. This is amazing. This is fantastic. I hope everybody could do the same than you. Yeah. And in your book, you talk about zero waste living and the 80-20 way. But please explain to us, what is it?
Yes. So zero waste living is a concept that just is very simple. It means reducing our consumption and reducing our waste. And what I really was attracted to about the movement was that it ties in very nicely to a lot of other interesting movements, like the minimalism movement, Marie Kondo. It ties into the marine plastic pollution problem and preventing that. And it also ties in very nicely with climate change, which is what I'd spent a good part of my career doing. So it's a concept that isn't real, meaning you never actually get to zero. Nobody can get to zero in the society we live in. And the 80-20 idea, the 80-20 principle, it comes from business. We used to talk about it in my workplace all the time. It's very simple, though. It's just the concept that not all actions are equal, and that if you put your attention on the most impactful 20% or so actions, you can get to 80% of the results. So we used to say, for example, 80% of our business came from 20% of our clients. So I decided that when I started looking into zero waste, it was very inspiring, but also very intimidating, this idea of trying to get to zero. And I thought, what if I could find the easiest and most impactful things that I could do around zero waste, and therefore apply this 80-20 rule. And basically that's why I wrote this book, was to tell other busy people that were like me a couple of years ago, it's not that hard to do. You don't have to quit your job. You can be really positively impactful in terms of reducing your waste and carbon footprint by focusing on just a few key things. And for me, those three things that I came up with, I call the magic three. It's focus on food, purge plastics, and recycle right. And I think that if you just focus on those, you can feel really good that you're making a very big impact.
Wow, good. So it means that the way we eat, like food, makes a big difference in the waste living way.
Absolutely. So food is one of the topics I think is most important to focus on. And when I talk about food, what I mean is dealing with food waste, because it's a very big problem, and also talking about a plant-based diet. So when we talk about food waste, it's incredible. In the developed world, in developed countries, we have a very big food waste problem. And in fact, the data shows that if food waste were actually a country, it would be third. It would be ranked third behind the US and China in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So that's huge. And in countries like the US, 30 to 40% of food is wasted, and most of that waste happens at the household level. So one of the things I talk about in the book, I give some strategies for dealing with food waste so that we don't have to be such a big part of the problem. And one of the things I talk about, one of the strategies, is to make sure that what you're bringing into your home, you're consuming. So for example, one of the things I recommend is doing a daily fridge review, making sure that what is about to go bad in your fridge, you're aware of by bringing it forward. I actually have a shelf in our fridge that I label "Eat Me First." So that way anyone who opens up the fridge knows if they want to eat something, that's where they should start. I also recommend putting food in transparent containers, because what you don't see isn't there a lot of times. It feels like it's not there. If you can see it, then you're more aware of it, and hopefully you consume it faster. So I give some other ideas, but I think if we can tackle food waste at the household level, we would be making a very big dent in the problem.
If in case someone from your household is not on board with this way of living, what do you suggest?
Yeah, so I think it's hard once you figure out that this is something you want to tackle and something you want to do something about. I got very excited when I did. And then, of course, I told all my friends, all my family, including the household people in my family that live with me. And of course, not everyone is going to be feeling the exact same way at the exact same time. I think my son, who was living with me at the time, and my wonderful fiance were supportive, but they were not necessarily as focused as I was. So my recommendation is always to lead with positivity and to be gentle in your suggestions, and to, show your excitement when something goes well, but not necessarily focus on criticism when something doesn't go well. I find with my friends as well that when they see my positive attitude toward this, it can be contagious. So much better to lead with positivity.
Exactly. And Stephanie, how can we recycle better?
Yeah, so recycling is an important piece of the puzzle, and this is the tricky part. Recycling is done differently in every country, and even in the United States, for example, in every state, and even within a state, in every town and municipality. So what I always tell people is the most important thing is to know what your jurisdiction's rules are. And these are really easy. Usually when you Google recycling rules near me, you can come up with the municipality's rules. Some are fairly constant across, for example, the US. One of the biggest problems, if you talk to folks that run these recycling facilities, and I have been to all the ones in my region, what they will tell you is the number one problem is when people put plastic bags into the recycling bin, because these plastic bags get caught up in the machinery. Sometimes the entire facility has to be shut down while they try to pull these out of the rollers. So creates a lot of inefficiency. food contamination is another big problem across all recycling, I think, everywhere. But then when you get down to, do you leave the lid on the milk or do you not leave the lid on the milk? That's different for every jurisdiction. So I think it's really important that people get a quick sense of what the rules are for where they live, so that they're not what's called wish cycling, throwing something in hopes it's going to get recycled, but actually recycling things, that putting things in the bin that can be recycled.
Thank you, Stephanie. And like, speaking about food, I love pomegranates. And I'm in Spain, and the season is like from September to November, and I'm craving it. But basically what I'm doing is try to eat the fruits that are available here without, buying fruits that are imported. And what I've been seeing is that people are more educated about it now. I don't know if it's my impression, but I see that people are buying seasonal fruits.
Yeah.
It's that you have this idea, because I'm in Spain, so I don't know if you have the same feeling.
Yes, I actually have the same impression. I think the pandemic has made us more conscious about a lot of things. And one of them is definitely, food availability, especially at certain points in the pandemic. We were just not seeing some of the things that we were used to seeing in the stores. So I definitely think there's more of an awareness about food and seasonality than there was before the pandemic. And I will admit, I'm not very proud of this, but before I started doing the zero waste stuff, I ate whatever I wanted. I cooked. I like cooking a lot. I cooked whatever I wanted, no matter what the time of year. So I would have tomato salad in January, and I wouldn't think about it. But that, of course, means that you're buying your tomatoes from very far away, probably packaged in plastic. And so now I only put tomatoes in my salad when they're in season, and they taste a whole lot. I mean, there's so many advantages to buying locally and seasonal produce. I mean, yes, climate change, they're not transported from far away, but they also taste better. And you don't lose the nutritional value when something doesn't have to be transported across the country or across many countries. So absolutely, I don't know if everyone has noticed, but I do think there's more of a consciousness about seasonality since the pandemic. I think you're right.
So it's not wrong. And Stephanie, the plastic, how can we get rid of all these plastics that we get from the supermarket and other places? For example, Here in Spain, we have to pay for the plastic bags, and usually people take their own bag to the supermarket. But I don't see it very frequently in the US. So do you have any solution, or at least some tips that people can follow?
Yes, absolutely. So my recommendation when you're trying to figure out how to reduce your plastic is to start with one thing, to pick one thing that you're buying maybe every day, maybe every week, that comes in plastic. There's almost always a non-plastic alternative if you're willing to look for it. So if you think of that thing, for me, it was plastic water bottles. When I was working in the office, I was busy, as I said. I used to get a couple of these every day. So my one thing that I picked was, when I started this journey, is I bought a stainless steel water bottle. This is my bottle. I carry it wherever I go. If I forget it, I go thirsty. That reminds me to bring it next time. And that's been a really easy hack. And my philosophy about this is that if you pick one thing and you pay a lot of attention to it, it starts to open up your eyes to all the other single-use plastic in your life. And then you can start to, you don't have to get to zero, and I don't think you can get to zero very easily, but you can start to look out for those things that you're regularly buying that are contributing to the plastics problem. I know you write about, you have children's books, you write about marine pollution and what a terrible thing it is. So that's only one reason we should care. It's a really important one. Climate change. Plastic production contributes to climate change. Plastic production for the people that live near the plants, the facilities that make plastic, they emit very toxic air pollutants. So that's another reason to care. So I'll give you a couple of other solutions I have. So the plastic bags, as you said, there's a tax in the US in a lot of cities as well. So people are used to bringing their own grocery bags into the store. One thing people don't do very much, at least I haven't noticed, is you can also bring your own produce bag. So instead of using the thin plastic bags to put your broccoli or your lettuce, you can bring your own reusable bags to the store. One of my other favorite hacks, and all my friends who know me love this one, is paper towels. So the paper towels themselves are not recyclable, they are compostable, but the paper towels are always sold in plastic. And if you go through as many paper towels as we do, that means you're also using a lot of plastic packaging. An alternative that I use is what I call a non-paper towel system. So I got a couple dozen washcloths and I put them in a bin by the sink, and we use one washcloth the way we use one paper towel. When we're done with it, we put it in the dirty laundry, and doesn't add much to the laundry load. Everybody loves, that was an easy change in our house. The last one I'll share with you is a very big problem during COVID. And that is almost everyone is having to stay at home more, is doing more delivery of food. And these plastic containers, in many jurisdictions, the black part isn't even recyclable. So to get rid of this source of plastic, which has invaded many of our homes, what you can do is bring your own, instead of doing delivery, you can do takeout and pick up your food at the restaurant that you love and give your own containers to them for them to fill with the food. That has dramatically reduced this source of plastic for us. So those are some of the things. My philosophy is that once you open your eyes to how much you're consuming, you will try to find the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that you can reduce. It's a kind of a game.
Exactly. Also, I remember that my family always took their bag to the supermarket. So I believe that the best way, I don't know if I'm right, but it started doing what we did before.
Absolutely. I think you're right. There are so many hacks. There are so many ideas we can borrow from what our parents and grandparents did. It won't solve everything, but like, for example, the milkman, right? I mean, it used to be that milk was delivered to the doorstep. I have now found a farm nearby that produces milk and bottles it in glass bottles, and they do exactly like my grandmother did. And I can now return the milk bottle to them every week. I leave it outside, they pick it up. So things like this, I think you're right, we just have to remember, or we have to ask, what did people used to do? Because some of those ideas really would work well now.
Yes, Stephanie. Reaching zero waste is very important, yeah, but it clashes with the consumerism that is, of course, embedded in our society.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it?
Yeah, so I think, if we look at it from a different angle, consumerism is a problem. It is one of the major contributors to why we're not zero waste, or why we're nowhere near zero waste. So we definitely have to tackle consumerism if we're going to get closer to zero waste. But I don't think that it's all bad news. I mean, I think that there are a lot of aspects of the zero waste lifestyle that actually contribute to growth in economies and profit for companies, and employment as well. So if you look, for example, at the renewable sector, solar and wind solar especially is a very labor intensive business. When you talk about not just the production, but the installation of solar panels. So That's one example. There are also recycling. As I said, I've been to all the recycling facilities in my area. This is a very labor-intensive business. So I think if we recycle better and we recycle more, recycling is not the solution to the problem, but that is an industry that is also labor-intensive. And then what's really fascinating is all the new entrepreneurial ideas that are coming up to try to address the zero waste issue. Those are sources of employment and growth and job growth as well. And I'll give you one example. There's a company I'm supporting locally that's called Plastic Tree. That it actually is trying to counter the idea of plastic, so it's kind of a funny name. But this is a woman, a solo entrepreneur, who started a business where she collects things on a weekly basis that people could reuse, but they can't maybe for themselves in their home. You put them in a box and she finds another use for them. So you pay a small subscription, and things like egg cartons, some of these takeout containers that can be reused, she finds a new use for them. So there are tons of entrepreneurs out there that are coming up with ideas. So I think it can be good for the economy as well. So we have to keep that in mind.
That's an amazing answer. And Stephanie, I'm so happy to have met you, because I'm happy that you wrote this book, and I'm sure you will be able to help many people to start, because like me, I love this theme, but I always think that I'm not going to be able to follow, 80%, but as you said, if you do 20%, is already a good thing. Yeah?
Yes. I think we have to get rid of the concept of perfect, get rid of the concept of zero, and focus on the really impactful and easy things that all of us can do. My goal is to help people feel like this is accessible to them and not a dream, like a man on the moon kind of mission.
And yes, and it's amazing. So Stephanie, in your book, you talk about the importance of plant-based diet. So please give us some tips about it.
Yes. So what I always say is, if you're a vegetarian, which about 5% of the population is, that's terrific. We all know that a plant-based diet is better for the planet. But I'm not a person of extremes. And as you can tell from the discussion and the title of the book, 80-20, I don't think you have to be 100% vegetarian to make a really big difference. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is the idea of the carbon intensity of food. It's not that all vegetables are good and all meat is bad. There are lots of things in between. So let me give you an example. If you are looking at the intensity of 1 kilogram of beef, 1 kilogram of beef is responsible for emissions, carbon emissions of 60 kilograms for every 1 kilogram. But it's not that you have to go all the way down to becoming a vegetarian to really drop the carbon intensity of your diet. So if you look at beef and then you look at chicken, chicken is 10 times less than beef. And if you look at wild-caught salmon, that's half again of chicken. And then you're getting very close to the same levels of carbon intensity as vegetables. So what I always say is, the next meal you're having or the next meal you're planning, you have a decision to make. You don't have to decide to be a vegetarian and that your next meal is going to be vegetarian. But if you know you want some animal protein, make some smart decisions and, choose salmon, for example, instead of beef. I do eat beef, but since I've been doing this and since I've tried to be more aware, I try to limit no more than once a month. So it's really important, I think, to take away the stigma of, if you're not a vegetarian, you're not helping the planet. It's not true. If you're not a vegetarian, make better decisions for the planet at every meal.
So without knowing it, I was already helping the planet.
Absolutely.
Because, what we do at home is try to eat like meat only once a week, and we try to eat fish or only vegetables. So I feel better now.
You should feel great. I have a goal of 4 vegetarian meals per week that I would serve at dinner. And for us, that's a really big deal, because the way I grew up, the way I raised my son, was dinner isn't dinner unless there's some kind of meat at the table. So to go to 4 times a week vegetarian for us is a big deal. For other people may not be a big deal. And I've had to really increase the amount of vegetarian recipes that I've introduced. So I do a thing on Instagram, a vegetarian cook along, where I sort of make it fun for me and anyone else who wants to join in to try out a new vegetarian recipe, simple recipes. And many of those now are on rotation in our household, and we make regularly. And there are many of them that nobody even says anything when I serve. They don't say, oh, this is a vegetarian meal. They're quite happy with just how delicious it is. So we've come a long way.
Tell us, how can we find you and also your books? Because I read that you also give workshops about it.
Yes. So my book is available at any of the online retailers, any of the online bookstores. I have links to places where one can find the book on my website, which is www.zero, spelled out, wasteindc.com.
So Stephanie, you share recipes on your Instagram.
Yes. So my Instagram account is at Zero Waste in DC. And yeah, so every week I find a recipe online, and I encourage anyone to join me in cooking it on a certain day of the week. And then we share, what did we think about it? And so now I have, a couple of dozen of vegetarian recipes that I make regularly that I'm very happy with, and everyone in the house seems to be happy with as well.
This is wonderful. We need it.
So I've just started offering workshops to help individuals at the household level get to the 80-20 in their life, get to reducing their carbon and waste footprints. One of the things I've started offering is recycle workshops so that people can see, and I've also, in the time of COVID, I offer these online now, which is kind of fun because a group of people can actually learn from one another about what works, what doesn't work, and where the opportunities are to reduce. So yes, I'm excited to be launching this work. And as I said, my hope and my goal is to help as many busy people like I was a couple of years ago that thought they don't have time for any of this, to see how easy it really is.
Yeah, and I hope many people can access your links, read your books. I'll be reading your book because this is for us. Yeah, it's for us, for our kids, our grandkids, and we have to start as soon as possible. We cannot continue like this because soon it will be very difficult, to live in a place where we have a lot of plastic. So it's all the problem about if fish will be dying, and our
way of life can't continue. So we have to do something. Yeah.
So Stephanie, thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you so much, Lucia. Great to talk with you.
Yeah, you are doing an amazing, beautiful work, and I hope I can have you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.